This episode of Islanders Reveal All is sponsored by Belvedere Guesthouse. Situated close to the ferry terminal in Brodick, here you can be all settled within minutes of arriving on the island. Belvedere has been welcoming visitors to Arran for over 100 years, since being built as a letting house by retiring Sea Captain Hamilton in 1920. Here you'll find modern facilities in a traditional setting. The doors and skirting boards are made of South American mahogany that was used as ship's ballast on one of its return journeys. Today on Islanders Reveal All, I'm in conversation with Joel and Sarah Pomfret, who in partnership with Jerry own the successful Number 16 restaurant in Glasgow. And they also run pop-ups and occasional home delivery gourmet meals here on Arran. Both Joel and Sarah grew up on Arran, and although they went to the same high school and shared many of the same friends, they almost never met. Their life journey has seen them circumnavigate the globe with lots of interesting adventures and career changes. And we'll come on to that shortly. So, thank you for joining us today, and hello Joel and Sarah.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Hi.
Hi. So first of all, I just wanted to find out a little bit more about where you both grew up. So I know, Sarah, you were born on Arran, and you grew up here. Whereabouts in Arran did you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Shiskin, over in the west side, God's country, as we call it. Yeah, went to Shiskin Primary School, lived just, our house is just beside the primary school, so it was, yeah, my mum was the janitor, cleaner.
Wow.
For 36 years there, I think. So she was there before my brother and I started. So when I was about 4, before I was at primary school, I used to go up with my mum in the morning and help her to clean. And then when I started school at 5, I got really angry with other kids because they were making things messy and that my mum was going to have to come and clean it. So I was always telling people off for making a mess.
And what about yourself, Joel? Because I know you were born on Arran as well.
Yeah, so I was born at Lamlash Hospital, about 150 metres from here. And when I was 1, we moved to an island called Tristan da Cunha in the South Atlantic. We stayed there for 3 years. My dad answered an advert in the Guardian newspaper, and it was for an agricultural officer on this remote island, and I think he says he was the only person who applied for the job, and that's how he got it. And he shipped me and my 2 older brothers, we were all under the age of 5, and my mum out to Tristan. Flew to Cape Town, and back then there was only 2 boats a year that would take you there. It's just a small volcanic island in the middle of nowhere, much like Ailsa Craig.
Wow.
Population of 300, British people, 7 surnames.
7 surnames?
7 surnames,
And is yours one of them?
No. No.
And does it have anything particularly famous about it that perhaps, apart from being obviously like Ailsa Craig?
Well, if people have heard of it, it would usually be because it erupted in the 60s. I think it was 1961, the volcano erupted and everyone had to get evacuated. So the Navy went out there and took everyone back to South Africa and flew everyone back to the UK, and all the residents stayed in the UK for 2 years before it was safe to go back, and I think every single one of them opted to return to Tristan. Yeah.
So I understand that you've got a fairly famous doctor from there as well.
Oh, yeah,
a TV doctor.
Yeah, while we were there, the doctor was Dr. Hilary Jones, who's sometimes he's on the morning telly sometimes, isn't he?
Yep. He was on GMTV, I think.
Yeah, he was the doctor there for the whole time. My mum and dad were quite friendly with him, and he came to Arran a couple of times to visit us.
Yeah, so I'm guessing you would pretty much know everyone on the island, actually.
You would, yeah, you would, and I've got quite a lot of memory. You know, I remember a lot about the island, the whole layout, and all the people. Even though I would have been 4 when we left, I was just under 2 when we got there. But I remember a lot about it. Yeah.
Ever been back?
No, I would love to go back. It's something that we plan to do.
It's on the list.
It's a bit easier to get to now.
Before we're 50, maybe, or when we're 50.
Yeah. Back then there was only 2 boats a year. Now I think there's 4 or 5. I mean, there's no airport, there's no tourism or anything like that. It's quite difficult to get there. You know, you have to apply quite far in advance to get a visa, and you have to have a good reason for going there. And if you're not related to anyone, or you're not going in an official capacity, it can be quite tricky. But because we lived there, or I lived there, then it would help a little bit.
Yes.
But a bit easier to get there now. It still takes 7 or 8 days in a boat, but you you can spend 2 or 3 weeks and get the same boat back again.
And it might be worth just changing your surname as well.
Yeah.
Find out
So
one of
Rogers or Lavarello or something like that.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so, Sarah, you were quite the head girl at Lamlash High School, I believe.
Well,
So tell us a little bit about that.
To be honest, it was so long ago. Yeah, well, I was captain, girls' captain of the school. And it was as much a surprise to me as it was to anybody else, because it wasn't based on academic ability or achievements. Yeah, it was just something that was voted for by students and teachers. And I think the responsibilities were largely around working with the prefects, keeping the first and second years off the corridors, that kind of thing.
And what about yourself, Joel? Because I don't think you're renowned at Lamlash High School for your academic ability.
No.
And you were a bit of a character.
Well, I don't know about character, but I wasn't. I mean, I didn't find it particularly difficult, the work, but I found studying difficult. I wasn't very good when it came to exam time of year.
Right.
So I stayed on for 5th year and sat some hires and didn't do very well with them. So I made the mistake of staying on for 6th year. Resat them and didn't really get anything out of it at all. I should have left when I was 14 or 15, really, or as early as I could, and because I didn't achieve anything in the later years, I was more inclined to be in the White House Woods smoking cigarettes than to be in the study room. So yeah, I didn't really achieve much, to be honest, at high school.
But as I understand it, even though you both went to the same high school, shared a lot of the same friends, you were head girl, you never actually met at high school at all.
No, Joel was a year above me at school. So I knew of him, and I knew back then, you might be surprised to learn that Joel had a shock of black, long curly hair, glossy, kind of...
That was a Brill cream.
Brill cream, back in the day. So I knew of him, but we just didn't move. I really loved school. I enjoyed it so much. I just really enjoyed it. I was kind of didn't really want to leave. I stayed on for 6 years and just really enjoyed the whole culture of it and everything. I think we probably wouldn't have been hanging out in the same places.
No.
So yeah, we didn't
smoking
really
around the bike sheds probably wasn't on the list.
I never gave that a go. But yeah.
So how did you meet then? Because that I think was quite an interesting story, and it wasn't on Arran.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. So it'd be about 5 years ago. My friend Jamie Crawford and I were up in Glasgow, and he'd asked me to join him at an evening talk on the Glasgow skyline. It was an architectural talk.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, I don't know, really? And he said, well, there's free wine. I was like, yeah, okay, I'm there. So we went, and it was at Cottier's in the West End. And so it finished there must have been about 8 o'clock. And we thought, oh, we need to get something to eat. So we came out, and we were patrolling Byres Road, wondering where to go. And I said, oh, we should go to number 16. That's the 2 guys from Arran. They're Joel and Jerry. We should go there, we've never been. So we popped in, and Suze, the lovely restaurant manager, was very welcoming. It was like a Tuesday night, say 8:30. And she said, yeah, come on in. And we just had the most fantastic evening. Great meal, lots of wine. Suze came and joined us.
But I wasn't working that night, was I?
Joel wasn't around, no.
Oh, okay. So you almost never met then.
Yeah, we did, yeah. And
there's a theme here, isn't
there is,
there?
yeah, something like that. So we had a great night, and we left, there was a little comment card on the table, so we just left a little comment to say, thanks for a brilliant night. Hope to see you soon, Jamie and Sarah from Arran.
Yeah. And then when I came back to work a couple of days later, I had a wee look on... I sent you a message, didn't I?
Yeah.
I sent you a message.
Send me a little message
just
on
to make
Facebook.
sure that she enjoyed a meal. I had checked her out first on Facebook to see that she was definitely single.
And Instagram.
And I think Suze had assured you that the gentleman I was dining with was probably not my boyfriend, because
Oh, okay.
Jamie had a scream louder than me, so we had a bit of a hilarious night, and so she got the vibe that we were just mates. And
so just inquired to make sure that she enjoyed a meal, and perhaps she might like to join me for an evening out.
beverage.
Yeah.
And where was the first date?
Where did we go for our first date, honey?
So you gave me the option of West End, city centre, Finniston.
Yeah.
That's right. You choose the place. I would choose the restaurant,
I
wasn't
choose
it?
the district, and you choose the place. So I chose Finniston, and you chose...
So we went to the Kelvin Grove Cafe. We met for a cocktail at the Kelvin Grove Cafe
Very
in
nice.
Finniston, and it all went quite well. So we decided to go for something to eat together,
did,
didn't we?
yeah, we did.
We hadn't arranged to go for a meal together. Had we, we'd
No,
arranged to meet
kept it
for a
loose.
drink, you know, kept it loose to see how
just
it
in
goes.
case.
Because if you don't be committed to a meal with someone, you're not.
You want an out.
Yeah, you wanted to disappear out the back door or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we went for a meal at the Italian place, didn't we?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we did. And then you popped me in a taxi home, and the next few dates, very, very romantic. Swept me off my feet.
Oh,
Gloria.
really?
That's how this happened.
Quite the romantic then.
Indeed.
Because I understand that you were quite committed to some travel and some holidays at the time.
So we'd kind of started getting serious, let's say, you know, around Christmas time, and we went up to Isle of Skye, didn't we?
Yeah.
Took you up there.
That was date 4.
Date 4, went to
Date
trip up to
4, love
Skye
it.
for a weekend. So, but I'd already arranged to go away for a couple of months in the February, hadn't I? So, I was in Vietnam for 2 months, and we had arranged to have a holiday in India. So on the way back, so I flew to Vietnam via Delhi, and I'd been to India a few times, and I knew my way around, and I'd rented motorcycles over there, and I'd been all over really, so I was quite comfortable there. On the way back, Sarah flew from the UK to Delhi, and I met her at the airport in Delhi, and the plan was to have 2 weeks travelling around.
On the motorbike?
On the motorcycle for the first week, that's right.
My mum was like that, what?
So
You're going where?
I was going to say, did you say you were romantic?
Yeah, well, I think it's quite romantic, a motorbike.
Yeah.
No, it was a comfortable motorbike, though, wasn't it? It was quite a new one. It wasn't a ratty old thing which I'd normally go for. I had to invest in a more market model.
So
minimal luggage to bring then, in that case.
And also having not seen each other for 2 months, you know, I was kind of, it was a bit daunting, because I was like, what if we meet in Delhi and we think, you know, but we'd spoken almost every day.
That's
I think, the whole time. So
and then we spent the next week. Went up to the mountains or the foothills, you could say.
Of the Himalayas, it was amazing. We travelled all the way up through India and had a brilliant.
We did, nice and.
But it wasn't plain sailing, was it?
No.
I believe there was a little incident on the Gloria Pass.
Oh God.
Yeah, well. Yeah, about 2 days out of Delhi.
Anxiety Pass, we nicknamed it.
Anxiety Pass, I love that.
Honestly.
Yeah, that tested us.
Oh, sure did.
We worked our way up, and we didn't know where the top was, but we assumed it was quite near the top, and the bike stopped working.
Scariest thing ever.
A bit overheated, and you're about 6 or 7 miles from any village in the middle of nowhere, really. And the bike stopped working. It looked like it overheated. So we kind of thought, right, what should we do here? And I checked the oil, and there was no oil in the engine. Like, oh no, I should have filled it up with oil. This is the problem. So we rolled all the way, well, not all the way downhill. We rolled down for a couple of miles, stopping at little huts,
the thing
asking
was,
for oil.
On the way up the hill, we'd been, you know, woo, and we'd been waving to all the locals.
Everyone
and the
waves
kids
at you.
were out. Yeah, hi guys. And then half an hour later, we're trundling back down the hill.
rolling down with our tail between our legs.
Does anyone know where there's a garage? Can you help us?
Yeah,
It's
you
just
have to be nice on the way up because you don't know who you're going to meet on the way down.
There's a metaphor
Very
of
much.
life there.
So we managed to get it sorted. We rolled down probably 2 or 3 miles, stopping at every little hut. Can we get some oil? Anyway, eventually found somewhere that was shut. They opened up for us, gave us a litre of oil, then set off again. And we were great. We were in high spirits again, weren't we?
Yep.
All the way back up to the top. Got just past the point we'd broken down before, and it stopped again.
Yep.
So what we did, we just waited for the bike to cool down. We stopped and started, and by the time we got to the top, we could see the very top of it. And there was snow up there as well, but the relief was unbelievable, wasn't it? Just to get there.
But the roads were so narrow, and there was, you know, it was a sheer drop.
That sounds incredibly romantic, actually. And it sounds like a very hard act to follow. So when you're thinking of proposing, I'm thinking you might have proposed to Sarah, actually.
Yes,
Bill.
yep.
So how do you follow that then? I mean, I'm thinking the Gloria Pass here. How do you go somewhere else that would be as amazing?
If I'd asked you to marry at the top of the Gloria Pass, you may not have said
I probably would have had to, take a rain check. Maybe. No, I'm kidding. So it was actually on the top deck of the Arran ferry.
Really?
Yes.
Going to Ardrossan?
Coming over to Arran. So we were living in Glasgow, and before we did our very first number 16 Arran pop-up, we were coming over to speak to the folks at the wine port, because they'd kindly said, you know, that'd be where we could do our first one. And we got on the ferry, and I wasn't going to go. I said, oh, you can just go. I can't remember, there was something else, a Sunday, 25th of February. And Joe said, no, come on, we'll make a day trip of it. And I was like, right, okay, we'll come over, and I'll maybe arrange to see my mum, and I'll maybe do other things, that's fine. So we came over, got onto the ferry, and spoke to a few people, had a cup of coffee, and then Joe said, oh, should we go outside? I said, what? Like tourists? What?
The tourists go outside.
I don't think
Outside.
it wasn't even a sunny day, was
Well, it
it?
was quite sunny, but it was cold and windy. Anyway, I said, right, okay, go up to the deck then, and we go out on the deck and kind of sitting there.
And you didn't
lovely.
suspect a thing?
No, I just there was,
Wow.
you know, tourists and dogs and all that kind of stuff. And the next thing, we were seated right next to the big funnel. So I mean,
There wasn't any other seats.
It was so busy.
Wasn't it?
So the next thing I
didn't
know,
want to do it sat next to someone.
Joel's down on one knee, shouting, Joanne, I was like, what? Saw the ring, and yeah, he'd had it loose in his back pocket, which again gives me the heebie-jeebies. But yeah, so there he was with the ring on the top deck. And so by the time we got to the wine port, it turned into kind of just a day of celebrating with our friends and family. It was lovely.
So how do you follow that then? What kind of a wedding do you arrange, Joel, for that kind of romantic? Because it is romantic,
Yeah.
and especially with Holy Island and Arran in the backdrop.
Yeah. Well, Mum and Dad moved to a small island in Greece about 25 years ago. They left
Oh, okay.
Ocheleffen and moved out there. Tiny wee place, only got 600 people on it. One little village. Mum and Dad have a house in a bay on the other side of the island with a taverna it's about 200 metres from the beach, and there's a traditional taverna down there, and not much else.
Wow.
So after we'd already been to Greece, hadn't we, by that before I proposed, and we thought that would be the ideal place.
It was just idyllic.
Yeah,
As soon as
get married down on the beach, down at the taverna. We were I was good friends with the owner of the taverna there. I'd worked for him in the past, and yeah, we got married down there. We got the local mayor to marry
Really?
us.
Oh, that sounds
wonderful. Which
wonderful.
was quite interesting, wasn't
It was,
With his
yeah.
translations
It
and
was,
whatnot.
yeah, it was quite
different.
funny.
It's making me
Yeah.
think of Rowan Atkinson at the moment.
Yes, the holy goats and all that. 'Cause
Yeah.
It's very much like that. And
Yeah.
the spigots and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had
it was.
a few friends come out from a lot from Arran,
Yeah,
wasn't there?
yeah,
From
yeah.
all over, and there were probably 40 or 50 of us there for the week. So it was more like went on boat trips and
Brilliant. Yeah, just a week
went
of...
mob handed to restaurants 40 at a time.
We did, and we made sure that we spread our trade among all the local hostelries.
There's only 3 or 4 restaurants you
And,
see and oozeries. So.
Yeah, and they were really appreciative. They loved having us there because we were well behaved and we spent a lot of money, and we were, it was just it's just happy times.
So you talked about working there then, and so just coming on to your sort of work experience, because it's been quite an interesting work path that
guess,
you've had.
yeah.
Everywhere from Arran to Australia to California to New Zealand. So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing, what you were doing to get to where you are now.
Sure. Well, on my first job, before I left school, I worked at the pantry in Whiting Bay. That was my first job, waiting tables. I wasn't waiting tables for too long, really. I think I was waiting tables for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I did a shift in the kitchen washing dishes, and then I did another shift washing dishes, and then the next week I was just washing dishes. So I'm not sure whether I was so good at washing dishes that they wanted me in the kitchen, or whether I was so rubbish at waiting tables that they didn't want me doing that anymore. So I was washing dishes for that first summer. And then the next year, when I was 17, I left home. I left school on the Friday, moved out on the Saturday, moved to Lumlash, and then started work at Arran Aromatics on Monday morning.
Ah, wonderful.
And I was working at Arran Aromatics till 5:15, and then start work at 5:30 at Willie's Bakery. So I was
So you were baking the bread?
I was
or-
helping bake the bread, yeah. We did bread in the
Wow.
evenings back then. That's all we did with the loaves of bread. And then I'd finish at 11, 11, and hitch back to Lumlash. And then for the second half of the summer, I carried on working at Arran Aromatics, but I worked at the Kilmickle Hotel, and I was washing the dishes in there, but it was great
There's a
fun.
bit of a theme here, isn't
Yeah.
there? But you must
do
be
much of the dishwashing then, I might add, for all that experience.
No, not
you've
unless I
got.
have to, but I really enjoyed it. I loved working at the Kilmickle. With
Yes.
Nancy and Jeffrey, it was brilliant. Really, really enjoyed it. Yeah, a lot of good memories. A lot of fun in that kitchen, it really was.
You must know
Yeah.
a lot of people on Arran then. So,
Yeah.
so what took you abroad then? So quite a lot of experience on the island, and then
Yeah.
you went abroad.
Well-
And so what sort of jobs did you do?
Well, when I worked at Arran Aromatics for that summer, I was saving up to go to Australia. So I left just after my 18th birthday, and went there on my own and travelled all around for the year. But I hadn't really had any experience waiting tables, as you know. In the pantry, I was only doing it for a week.
Yes.
So I had a few different jobs over there. I picked cherries for a week or two. And I was riding a pedicab, like a tricycle taxi in Surfers
Oh,
Paradise
wow.
for 6 weeks or so. I worked as a courier in Perth, pushing the trolleys around the city. And then I came back from Australia. I got my first proper job in a restaurant in Regano in Glasgow.
And so
Yeah.
tell me a bit about that, because I believe that was kind of quite pivotal for you to decide about going into hospitality or staying in hospitality generally.
Yeah, well, it was a chance meeting of a friend in the city centre, and I had just got back, and he was working at Regano restaurant, which is quite a well-known upmarket place. It's been there a long time.
Yeah.
And he asked me if I fancied a job, waiting tables. Said it was, it was good money and good tips and stuff like that. So right, I'll give it a go. He said, you just got to tell them that you've got experience. So I went for the interview, and I kind of lied about how much experience I'd had. And on the first shift, it was blatantly obvious that I hadn't got that type of experience. But the manager at the time kept me on, and I worked there for 1.5 or 2 years. It was quite a high standard of service, and the manager wasn't really a very pleasant chap to work for. He would shout at you and be quite mean, but he knew how to operate the restaurant properly and how service should be done. And so I learned a lot working for him. So it was good experience for me. And after working there, that's how I financed all my travels, was by working in restaurants. You could, anywhere that I went, I knew that I could get a job straight away. Because for instance, I went to San Francisco because a friend said, oh, that would be a good city to work in. And so I flew there. I didn't have any money. I think I arrived with £200. I would have been in my early 20s. And I know that if you go out and go around 20 restaurants in a day in a city, one of those is going to be looking for a member of staff, and they'll get you to come in that night probably. And so the hospitality was always really a way to finance my travels, a way to save some money, and then spend my money in Asia, go to India, and money goes a long way.
And on Sarah,
of course.
Obviously.
But I worked in a pen factory in Japan, making pens, and I was a mountain bike tour guide in the Virgin Islands, and I was planting trees in Denmark. So I've done all sorts of jobs, not just hospitality, but that's what's
wonderful.
Yeah.
So what about you though, Sarah?
I guess, like most young people here, tourism and hospitality is where you start. So I think I was about 12 when I had my first job, working at Macri Tea Room. Waiting
love Macri
tables. Yep. And I did that for a few summers, I think. And then I worked at the Rock Hotel with my mum. She worked there behind the bar for many years. That's where I pulled my first pint. I think I was probably about 14. Pulled my first pint in the Rock. Willie McConnell, I've got him to thank for that. And yeah, and the Greening as well. I kind of just, and then the Kinloch, kind of, that was the kind of, still is the kind of stalwart hospitality place in Blackwaterfoot. And I worked there for many years. Worked my way up from the dining room to the bar and loved it. Absolutely loved working in the bar, just meeting people. And even when I went away to go to college and uni, I would come back at weekends and every summer to work there. So yeah, I really enjoyed that.
That's brilliant. And so then you moved to Glasgow. So what did you do in Glasgow?
I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was a bit of a crossroads, and then I thought, well, tourism, isn't it? It's tourism. So I went to college for a couple of years, and then went to Strathclyde Uni to do tourism and marketing. And then when I graduated, I got a job with the Greater Glasgow and Clyde Valley Tourist Board and Convention Bureau, which is not easy to say. I started off in reception there, and then got a job in the PR office, which was just
fantastic.
A brilliant job. My job was to entertain journalists from around the world who were coming to Glasgow to review it. So the Rough Guide, any kind of magazine or newspaper, that was my job, was to issue press releases and show them a good time, basically. I had such fun times. People from the New York Journal and various travel magazines.
And must have made you feel great to be showing them around a city that you knew so well.
Yeah, I mean,
and especially with all the kind
tours.
of restaurants and wine and
part of the sales pitch was that, we have over, I don't know how many there are now, but at the time, this was 20 years ago, there's over 700 restaurants and bars, 70 parks and gardens, look up in Glasgow, the architecture. So it was just brilliant. I loved it. I got to know so much about the city, and I just loved being able to show people bits about it that they wouldn't have seen or they wouldn't have known about.
And there was a little bit of a Strictly Come Dancing kind of
Yeah.
potential career here. So that sounds really intriguing. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, I got the opportunity to do a Strictly Come Dancing, the Scottish version, if you like, at the Hilton in Glasgow. So the 2 months that Joel was in Vietnam kite surfing, not long after we met, that was the time I was training and performing in Strictly. So I literally did Strictly Come Dancing where I was the runner-up. It was the best thing I've ever done. It was fantastic. And then the next week I was on a plane to Delhi. So it was...
What was the charity that you...
So it was the Prince and Princess of Wales, the Prince Hospice in Glasgow.
Yes.
So I think I raised about £7,500 for
that's
them.
phenomenal.
But that was, a lot of support from Aaron. My work were very supportive. So yeah, that was a real pleasure. Yeah.
Brilliant. And so just kind of moving to number 16 now, so that was quite a brave thing to do.
Yeah.
What gave you the confidence to,
Excuse me.
to take on number 16? I know obviously with Jerry.
Aha.
Tell me a bit about that.
Well, I'd returned from New Zealand when I was in my early 30s, and it was time to get a proper job, or at least stop waiting tables for other people and maybe settle down. So returned to Glasgow and, well, worked in a couple of restaurants first of all, and then I started working at number 16. Couldn't really get away from the waiting tables thing. And I worked at number 16. Jerry got me a job there. He was working as a chef there.
Right.
So started working there for the previous owners, and so got to know the business quite well and the restaurant and everything else. And then the restaurant came up for sale a couple of years after I stopped working there. In the meantime, Jerry and I were looking for somewhere for us to buy, and as luck would have it, number 16 came up very suddenly, and we jumped in there straight away, went to see the owners immediately. And because we knew the place, we knew the staff, it was absolutely ideal, nice and small as well. And we didn't have to change too much. We opened about 3 months later and kept almost all the same staff. And just took it from there. And it was a lot easier than, say, starting your own business when you're taking on one that's already quite well known and established. So,
and it seems to be going pretty well. So what sort of things would you say are the real successes that you've kind of experienced since you've taken over?
Since we've taken over, well, mainly due to the chefs. Really, we've won quite a lot of awards at the restaurant in Glasgow. We've got 2 AA rosettes, and we've been reviewed by the New York Times, and we've been in the Scottish newspapers a number of times, and generally really good reviews, and different award ceremonies. We've got a Michelin plate, which is awarded to restaurants which have a good, certain standard of food. But that's mainly down to the chefs and the staff there. That really what makes it all work is having the right staff. And since the last 2 or 3 years, we've been doing number 16 stuff over here,
Well, I was going to ask you about that. So what are the plans then? Because I've been to a couple of your pop-ups. I've also been on the receiving end of lovely home deliveries.
Well. Yeah.
So what's the plans then?
Well, we started the pop-ups, I think probably 3 years ago now, 2018. And since then, we've probably done 15, 20 of them, with a break when lockdown happened, where we had our own kitchen over here. We have our own kitchen over here, and that was ready to go at the end of summer last year. It's just a fully kitted prep kitchen, so we can prepare everything in it, and then we can go to a venue and just deliver the food at the and produce the food at the venue. But then lockdown happened, so we used that for our home deliveries, which we did most Saturdays throughout lockdown. And now since we were permitted to operate as a restaurant again, if you will, and use different venues, then we've been back doing the pop-ups, and we'll be continuing with those as long as people keep coming to them. Then that's what we're here for, the long term. The kitchen's not going anywhere. It's in place. It's a static kitchen. It's not mobile. It's all fitted out. It's all connected up, so it's not going anywhere. And so we're not going anywhere either. We'll be keep on doing the pop-ups and perhaps do some private catering, that type of thing. Yeah.
That's good to hear. So just staying on the food theme here, obviously when you're not eating at number 16, where would be the place that you say have had the most memorable meal in a restaurant anywhere in the world?
Probably the restaurant in Milan.
Yeah.
at number 16, we go away for a staff trip every year. We don't do anything throughout the year, but on New Year's Day normally, because we usually set up for 2 or 3 days, on New Year's Day we will fly somewhere. And we've been to places all over Europe. We've been to Barcelona and Copenhagen. We've been to Amsterdam, Milan, Munich, Dublin, Paris.
Gleneagles.
Gleneagles, we've been to Gleneagles, yep. And last year, 2020, we went to Milan for our staff trip, and the 8 of us, and Sarah came with us as well. And we went for a lunch in Milan. It wasn't a fancy restaurant, it was a very traditional place on the outskirts. So we walked out there, and we wanted to experience the meats and cheese and
the antipasti.
Antipasti, you call it, yeah, antipasti. So we chose this place. We were the only ones there. There was 8 of us. We had the restaurant to ourselves. The owner was the only one working there, and there was no menu. He just produced these big oval dishes of different sliced meats, and the only thing that came with these sliced meats was ricotta cheese and crusty bread. There wasn't any dips or chutneys or anything like that. You didn't need them. He didn't speak a word of English, did he? So he would come out with there was a certain order. Like there was probably 3 or 4 of these massive trays of meat that came out, but each tray probably had 4 or 5 different sliced meats, whether it be goose or donkey or beef or whatever it was, and he would explain to you what meat it was and where
but
the animal it was from.
He did it using these plastic animals. So he would go out the back and bring round, a cow, and then
point to the part of the cow.
Point to the part of the cow that we were to eat first. So you start with this bit, and then you do that. So it was just, it was pretty comedy. There was about 8 of us. It was just brilliant. He didn't speak really very much English at all. Our Italian was very patchy.
Worse than his English?
Probably. It sounds like Google Translate.
And there was a certain order you had to eat everything, wasn't there?
And he was watching us to make sure we did it in the right order.
And then we got onto the cheese board after that, and a certain order you eat the cheeses in. And for each, we just tried every single. We didn't have 2 bottles of wine the same, did we? It was all just an Amarone and then a
Primitivo
Barbera,
or
Primitivo, Sangiovese. He just brought out all these different
whatever he thought we would like next.
And that was going great, wasn't it? And we had such a good afternoon. And then he got out the homemade melon liqueurs and all sorts of strange alcohol.
He didn't want us to leave.
He didn't want us
we kept
to
trying to
leave.
leave, and he said, no.
Here's
another bottle of this Prosecco. And
so we were drinking shots at the end of the meal. Then it came to the bill, and the bill was only, I think, €450 for all 8 of us, all afternoon, all that wine, all that food. So we tipped him €50, and he was absolutely made up. And he was then he brought out 2 more bottles of Prosecco to drink before we left.
Celebrate the great tip that he just received.
It was 5:30 when we left, and we had our fancy meal booked in a fancy restaurant at 7:30 that night. So gave us time to walk back, and it was a bit of a waste of time, wasn't it? The restaurant that evening, but it was just such a lovely afternoon.
It was very
memorable.
We talk a lot about going back to it. Well, I don't know if it'd be the same going back to it a second time, but it was just
that was it. Just meat, cheese, bread.
It was just the experience, him as a host, and just everything. It was just wonderful.
I would say that was my most memorable meal for sure.
I have to admit, after that, I think there might be a few people asking if there's any jobs going. So that's what you get to do. And where do I apply? Really up for that. So when you're not eating at all these fancy restaurants and unusual places on the Jalori Pass and everywhere else in the world, what would you just have? A bit of comfort food, just in the kitchen. What would you make for yourself?
Well, we like a Sunday roast, don't we?
Love a Sunday roast.
Yeah, if we can. If we're at home on a Sunday, it's always a Sunday roast, and it's always pretty much exactly the same thing, isn't it? We start off with a couple of Bloody Marys, don't we? Bloody Marys, even though we wouldn't necessarily be hungover, but it's nice to have Bloody Marys on a Sunday. And the traditional roast chicken, Yorkshire puddings, roast potatoes. We have honey roast carrots and parsnips, stuffing, gravy. That's it, isn't it?
That's
it. The only variation we make is occasionally we'll have lamb's head of the chicken.
Yeah, we do sauce, mix it up a little bit.
That's it, and have a bottle of red wine with that.
Yeah.
And that would probably, if I was ever on death row and I had a final meal, I think I know that's what I would have. It'd be a Sunday roast, for sure. I've always loved it. I was brought up with that every single Sunday. We'd have exactly the same thing every Sunday.
The Sunday roast was not a new phenomenon, but we didn't do that in our house at all. So I've got right into it now. Yeah, we would have maybe roast lamb, but we didn't do all the trimmings and things. So I really enjoy that.
Well, let's hope you don't ever get to death row
and
have to choose that. But so you just threw in a few names of the wines that you have, so the Sangiovese and probably some Riojas and Primitivos and all those sort of things. So and I have had the pleasure of sampling some of the wines that you have had in the restaurant. You know, when I've been to the pop-ups. Where did your interest in wine come from, and does it tend to involve things like nice trips out by the wineries?
Yeah, it can do. When I was in Queenstown in New Zealand, I worked in a restaurant there, and a lot of the restaurants there are very, especially in Queenstown, it's all about the wine. They have a lot of local wineries, etc. So through them we'd visit local wineries, and I got an interest for wine then, really, quite late on. But with Number 16, the wine supplier will take the staff on wine trips, maybe once a year. Would be invited along, so we went. Got lucky enough to get taken to Rioja a couple of years ago now, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just before
September 19. That's when it was.
Honeymoon, because it was between our wedding and our honeymoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they took us to Rioja. There was eight of us again, and we knew it was going to be a good trip because the flight was at 7 o'clock from Edinburgh to Bilbao, and you're with other people that you haven't met yet. You meet them at the airport. And there were managers, and not necessarily just managers, but also just the staff who work in different restaurants that the wine supplier supplies. So we knew we were onto a fun trip when this air steward or stewardess came round and offered us drinks, and everyone had a Bloody Mary, and it was only 8 o'clock in the morning. So we thought, oh well, this is going to be fun.
This could be fun.
And it was absolutely fantastic. We just got treated so well. Our host was the rep from a group that owns wineries there, Roca Vega, and we started off in San Sebastian. In the afternoon we arrived, a minibus to San Sebastian, and took us on a boat trip and went round the little Pincho bars where they have all the little tapas. Yes. Northern Spain's fantastic tapas, and they match the wines with them. And so that was our first afternoon, and then the next 3 days were. Going around every morning, we would get taken to the winery and get shown around. Then you'd have a wine tasting, and it was all very personal. There wasn't a group; it was only us. There was no other people there at all, and you'd have a wine tasting throughout the afternoon. And then in the evenings, we would go. He would take us around his local Pincho bars. And then we went clubbing, didn't we, a couple of nights. Karaoke, and then to bed at 3, 4 in the morning. So you'd get up at, say, 9 o'clock to meet the bus there. Everyone's really hungover. No one's got any chat at all. You're on a bus for an hour or two going to a winery. And then once the wine tasting starts, after a couple of glasses, everyone perks right up. And
well, but my understanding was on these wine tastings, you're not supposed to swallow the wine. You're just supposed to use the spittoon and just taste it. Is that?
But maybe the first couple of glasses you'll spit it out, but after that you get stuck in, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he was encouraging that.
Yeah. So we've been on a couple of those trips, so that you get to learn a lot. But really, I would only have wines on the list that I like to drink, so that they may be, not always the most well-known ones or the most popular ones you may have heard of, but. I would have to like them for them to go on the wine list.
And it's the smaller producers that are more interesting, I think.
I think so, yeah. And we use a small supplier in Edinburgh. They're only a wee outfit. We've used them since day one, and they actually, they treat us very well. So
I can vouch for your wine list anyway. Yeah, so there you go. And so I just want to move on a little bit because I know you're both I know that Joel particularly is quite the action man. So if you were going to have a week off, I mean, let's assuming you weren't just going to drink Bloody Marys all week and eat Sunday roast, what sort of things would be in the mix, do you think, for that week?
Let's have a think. I would say there would be some motorcycling involved. And maybe some kite surfing. I haven't done it for a few years now, but I enjoyed it very much. I don't seem to have the time to do it now, but it's great being out there on the sea. I'm not particularly good at it or anything, but I can manage it. I can manage it on my own. So maybe a week in Bali where we can rent a motorcycle for getting around. There'll be nice restaurants.
You'd probably want to take in a MotoGP somewhere.
Yeah. Maybe stop in Malaysia on the way for the Malaysian MotoGP, Kuala Lumpur, and maybe a couple of days kite surfing and some nice foods.
And your most revered MotoGP rider?
Probably Valentino Rossi, like everyone else. He's such a character, isn't he?
He is.
Yeah, he's a legend. He's the greatest of all time, and he's still sticking in there. Even he's 40 odd now, I think. Not doing very well, but still He loves it. He just loves it enough to keep at it.
It's a longer career than a footballer.
Yeah, sure is, yeah.
And would that be your ideal week, do you think? Or would you be doing something different? I mean, could you leave him in Malaysia, go around the MotoGP? Or?
I'd probably join him at the MotoGP. I quite like that. I quite like, I love watching any sport really. I love anything like that. But yeah, it would be probably not dissimilar. My first experience of travelling around in the back of a motorbike didn't put me off, I have to say. I loved it in India, so I would do that. We've got plans to do that again, maybe early next year, to go away and do another motorbike trip. I just like the freedom of it, and you could just jump on the bike and scoot off, and And
you're not in a vehicle. You're behind the windows, whereas on a motorcycle you're a lot more out in the open. You can stop and get waved at a lot. And
it's a great way to see a country, I have to say.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and you don't get stuck in traffic jams either as much.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Although it's fairly hairy, some of those roads, I would say, in some of those parts of the world that you're talking about.
Yeah, as long as you take it easy and be alert.
And use your horn.
Use the horn a lot.
And your perfect weekend?
Oh, weekend. Probably up to Skye.
Yeah.
So we've got a house in Skye.
Okay.
And
Whereabouts?
I think so. It's in Carbust.
Oh, lovely.
So next to the Talisker distillery. And we've got friends that own a brilliant pub there called the Old Inn. Yeah. And they did do obviously, and they will do again, the live sessions on a Sunday with all the musicians come, and it's just brilliant. And so we've had many a wonderful weekend up there, including a lovely Sunday sesh with a Sunday roast, obs.
Well, I was going to ask, do they do a Sunday roast?
They do a really good Sunday roast.
One of the best.
They do. It's
excellent.
But that's the reason we were up there. Really, is the friend who owns the pub I went travelling with many years ago, and he bought the pub up there. There's only one pub. It's only a wee village, so that's how we ended up having a house there.
And
And have you seen much of the peat bog fairies recently during the pandemic?
Not during the pandemic, no. But they did come down, and a couple of the members.
Yeah, we had them at our.
They played at my 40th up in Skye, and they also played here at the Arran Lodge when we had our wedding reception when we came back from Greece. We got married over there, but had a reception here, and a couple of the members of the band came down and did the music for our wedding reception. Yeah,
pretty fantastic.
Yeah, we love all that. It's nice lively music.
Yeah.
I've only recently started to enjoy folk music and Gary Innes on a Sunday.
I think I don't know.
But I do enjoy it. Yeah.
Getting old before our time, but we do enjoy a bit of like my grandpa used to listen to Robbie Shepherd and the Hebridean Ceilidh Band every Sunday, and I was like, well, now we're at that stage.
Don't miss it. Listen to it on catch up, don't we?
If we don't get it during
the
weekend, we get it during the week. So yeah, that's
why not?
I don't know.
Music all the time, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's true.
And so I've got a couple of just to end on a few sort of quick fire questions, really, just to find out a little bit more about what makes you tick. So, Sarah, what's your favourite Arran tipple?
Oh, Arran, it's got to be gin, I think.
Arran gin?
I'm not a whiskey. Yeah, I'm not. Actually, I take that back. It's Arran Gold.
So you love the Arran Gold?
I love Arran Gold. I'm not really a whiskey or a beer drinker. I do love gin, but Arran Gold, I think, for me.
And that is whiskey based, but it's lovely, isn't it?
But it's so creamy and lovely, and it just slips down.
After
a good Sunday roast.
I would say the Arran gin. I love the Arran gin. We serve it in the restaurant. We only serve 2 gins in the restaurant. Arran gin is one of them. And obviously we serve them at the pop-ups, and we've got a bottle at home as well. I really like it. It's one of my favourite gins, and I'm not just saying that because it's an Arran gin. I really do like it. Yeah,
and why not?
I love it.
And so, who's the most famous or interesting person you've ever met, and why is that?
I think with the job that I had at Scottish Enterprise, I was really lucky to meet lots of, I guess, well-known or kind of successful business people. So we ran a project called Global Scot, which is senior or influential business people based around the world who are Scottish or have an affinity with Scotland, who help Scottish companies for free. So I worked in Europe, Middle East and Africa, worked in that region for many years with Scottish Enterprise, and you get to meet some fantastic people like Sir Jackie Stewart, met him a few times. Also worked with many politicians, all the First Ministers as part of my job as well. All very interesting. So probably, and in fact, when I was in Australia, I worked at Qantas when I was took a year out before I started working at Scottish Enterprise. And John Travolta, I don't know if you remember, he bought a jumbo jet.
He did,
back in
yes.
the day. He landed it at Sydney Airport and came into the Qantas headquarters. So probably he's the most famous person I've ever met. He was very nice.
Was he a nice
Very
I
nice
would imagine
indeed. He had
is.
his full captain's uniform on and everything.
Oh, wow.
You know, took his hat on. He was really...
He doesn't need to be John Travolta
very,
as far
well,
as
no.
I'm concerned.
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, that would do it. He was very nice. So that's probably the most famous person I think I've ever met.
Wow. And what about you, Joe?
Well, probably two. Most famous and most interesting would be different, I guess. Most famous is probably Chris de Burgh.
Oh.
Chris de Burgh. Chris de Burgh came to the restaurant. His personal assistant called, and he was performing in Glasgow, I think, for 2 or 3 nights. This would have been 6 or 7 years ago now. And his personal assistant came to the restaurant to check it out and see what kind of food we did, and to book a table for Chris de Burgh, his glamorous younger girlfriend, of course, who was about 2 feet taller than him, his bodyguard, his assistant. And they came in and they came in for dinner one evening, and they all had exactly the same thing. They ordered a tomato salad and a mushroom tagliatelle, and that was it. They had this exact same thing. And this was the night before his show, I think. And then they had arranged on the way out that if they could come to the restaurant after their show the next night, we would normally be shut by 10 o'clock, but they were going to come at 11 o'clock, so one of the waitresses stayed on. And they did. They came back the next night and had exactly the same thing. But the first night, on the way out, they were quite late. There was only one other table that was still in the restaurant at that time by the time they left. And it was 2 couples in I think in their 50s or 60s or so. And anyway, as Chris de Burgh was leaving, she was like, I knew they'd been talking, they recognised him. And she's like, Chris de Burgh, is it you? Is it really you? It's like, yes, it's really me. Oh, and she was absolutely made up. She was a fan. I think she was going to see him the following night, you know.
Wow.
So she was absolutely made up. And she's like, can you sing to me? So he did.
He did?
So he did a rendition of Lady in Red.
Oh, my
goodness. But when he was singing to her, he was holding her as he was singing her, but he was stroking her hair as well, which is a wee bit creepy. So that's probably the most famous person. But they did come back the next night, and they were all very nice. But interesting person probably would be my dad, I would say.
Really?
Yeah, yep. To do what he's done, to move up here and ship us all the way over to Tristan da Cunha and come back and build a house. We lived in, bought a ruin in the forest and spent 15, 20 years doing that up completely, pretty much on his own, and making his own electricity supply without any electricity, doing all that, and then buying a boat and sailing out to Lipsy, out in Greece. And
gosh, and he taught you to sail as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, we went sailing a few times, delivering boats out there. Yeah, but he's very interesting when you get talking to him. He seems to be able to do anything he turns his hand to. Doesn't matter what it is, he just does it and gets on with it. And
tells a good story as well.
Tells a good story as well.
Several times.
Oh, aye.
Yeah,
it's
good.
And you don't need to be famous to be great.
No.
Absolutely. So, if you could pick, Sarah, one place on Arran that's really close to your heart, that you think everybody should go to if they're coming to visit the island or coming to live here, where would that be?
Automatically, I just think Blackwaterfoot Beach. I think I just got lots of great memories of growing up in Shiskin and Blackwaterfoot, and I think it's just beautiful as well, and it's it's probably the best beach. I would say it's the best beach in Arran. I know there's other ones that are called on and quite
debatable.
Kilmorey, yeah. But I would say, yeah, that would be where I would, if I was on Scotland's Home of the Year and I had a red heart to put it down, that's where I would put it. Yeah. And
what about you, Joe?
Well, I guess mine would be similar, as in it's where I was brought up, and it'd be up in the south end, Ocheleffen, up in the woods there. The Kilmorey Water, the burn that runs up past the house. Spent my childhood on that burn, fishing and playing and camping and all that stuff when I was a kid. So I like mooching about down that way when I can, even to this day.
Metal detector.
With my metal detector, whether I've got a motorcycle off-road bike, so I can take it up the forestry and cut about places I used to play around when I was a kid on my motorbike. So I just love it down there.
Love it. And so, if you could have a dinner party with the ideal dinner guests, alive or dead, who would they be?
I don't know. I think someone like Barack Obama, somebody would be so interesting to. Robin Williams, for good crack, but he can tell a good story. And other people, a bit like Joel, my dad can tell a really good story. He's had a really interesting life, and I love, when we were together in the house and we have the family all together and Dad starts to talk about his time at sea and everything, I just, without him knowing, he does now probably, but I just sometimes put my phone on to record and just, you know, record it to listen to all his stories from being in the Merchant Navy. And then he sailed the puffers up the west coast of Scotland as well, and he escaped death several times. You know, he's left a ship and it's gone down within the next day or the next week, and just lots of, he's got lots of interesting stories. So I think I'd mix it up with famous and less famous people, but yeah. Dad would be there, yeah.
I need to invite him along actually to mine for dinner.
Yes,
He sounds great.
Yeah, absolutely. Just give him a wee gin lemon and listen to him. Yeah,
And get the video camera going.
Yeah.
And what about you then, Joel? Who would you invite to dinner?
Oh,
Apart from obviously this great company that you've mentioned.
who would I invite to dinner? Someone I find quite interesting is that there's, you probably find this quite boring, there's a guy called Alex Honnold who is a climber. I'm quite into, I don't want to climb myself, but I like reading about mountaineering, climbing, exploring, all the sailing, all that kind of thing, watching documentaries, etc. And Alex Honnold, he's a free solo climber. He's one that climbs the rock faces without any ropes at all. And he's done El Capitan and the Eiger, and he's literally up to 3,000 feet, holding on with his fingertips, with no safety apparatus at all. So the very thought of being in that situation, even being up there with attached to a dozen ropes, would scare the daylights out of me. Never mind having that kind of mental strength to be clinging to a rock face and one millimetre off and it's certain death. And he's an interesting character as well. I've seen him being interviewed, and so I'd quite like to sit down with him and see what makes him tick. And he's travelled all over the world doing this as well.
Sounds great. And also you could invite Tom Cruise, because he's done similar. He's
Yeah,
done
yeah,
on his
yeah,
Mission
yeah.
Impossible films.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember those scenes. I think that cost quite a lot of insurance for the Hollywood
because
team.
he did it himself, didn't he?
He did. So maybe get those two together.
Yeah, I'd come to
Yeah.
that. I'd come to that dinner party.
Yeah, I'm sure you would.
To be fair.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that, and thank you for
Pleasure.
joining us on Islanders Reveal All.
Thank you.
You're very
Gloria.
welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's
Thanks,
been
Gloria.
lovely.
Yeah.
I hope you've all enjoyed our conversation with Sarah and Joel on Islanders Reveal All. Over the months ahead, I'll be in conversation with other Islanders, prepared to let us see what makes them tick. And if you subscribe to this R&I channel, you can get notifications of further episodes. We're grateful to Belvedere Guest House for sponsoring this episode of Islanders Reveal All. If you're planning to visit the Isle of Arran, Belvedere provides the ideal base. It's conveniently close to the ferry and also close to everything else in the main village of Brodick. From its elevated position, you'll enjoy unrivalled views across Brodick Bay towards Goat Fell, Arran's tallest mountain. With a choice of double, twin and single rooms, your comfortable island accommodation awaits. And you'll find a link to Belvedere's website down below.